Welcome to this laryngeal anatomy review. This is designed for any students either in the graduate or undergraduate program at Western Michigan University. I specifically designed it for students in voice disorders who need to perhaps remind themselves of some of the anatomy that they took as undergraduates. Just before we get started, I thought it would be important to review some of the key functions of the larynx. Recognizing that it is a valve that sits atop of the lower airway. Its primary role, probably from an evolutionary perspective, was to provide airway protection, protect the airway from food getting in, foreign objects getting in. It also is very useful when it's closed off to generate intrathoracic pressure generation. We need to do that at times in our lives for things like childbearing or defecation, and so it serves that purpose as well. Most important for us in students of speech-language pathology, it is critical for producing speech and provides necessary valving for producing voice, or that buzzing sound that we then shape into speech. If we look at the larynx in the neck, what we see is that it's located in the anterior neck, not surprising for most of you. If you take your finger and place it on that little notch at the top of your breastbone and start to slide it up on the middle of the neck, you'll feel a kind of a corrugated sensation, which are the tracheal rings, and then you'll feel a small bump followed by another bump, which may or may not be larger, and those are the cricoid and thyroid cartilages that are prominent landmarks for identifying the location of the larynx. The larynx typically sits roughly between, on average, the third and sixth, between the third and sixth cervical vertebra in the neck. At least in the adult, it's in a higher position in youngsters. We have a fairly complicated skeletal structure to the larynx. There's only a single bone, but a number of cartilages, and we're just going to briefly review those. Going from superior to inferior, here's our bone of the larynx, or sometimes referred to as the hyolaryngeal complex. This is an anterior view, and this is the hyoid bone. These little bumps here are the minor horns, and these are the major horns here. In the lateral view, here you can see that the lateral surface of the hyoid, you can see that this is actually a horseshoe-shaped bone. This is a posterior view. You can see it poking out. We also have a large leaf-shaped structure, a cartilage called the epiglottis. Here is the big butterfly-shaped cartilage called the thyroid cartilage. And then as we move more inferiorly, we can see here and here and here the cricoid cartilage, which sits atop the trachea. Sitting on top of the posterior margin of the cricoid cartilage are two small pyramidal-shaped cartilages, and these are the arytenoid cartilages. Now, if we look at these individually and break them out, we can see that the larynx is primarily made up of a number of unpaired cartilages. That is the epiglottis, the thyroid cartilage, and the cricoid cartilage, and then a pair of cartilages, and those are the arytenoid cartilages. Now, there are some smaller cartilages in the larynx, for example, these little guys here, which are the corniculate cartilages and the cuneiforms, which sort of float in some tissue, but they don't have a lot of functional significance. If we look at the thyroid cartilage, we see that it is, again, kind of butterfly-shaped with these horns rising superiorly, called the superior horns, and the inferior horns. The cricoid, which is actually has kind of a signet ring shaped, it's actually a full ring, unlike the tracheal cartilages, which are more C-shaped. They're open at the back. If we look at it laterally, it looks often on something like this, where it's fatter at the back than it is at the front, and has the appearance of a ring. Sitting atop of those, again, as I mentioned, are the arytenoid cartilages, which have three prominent prominences: the muscular process, the vocal process, and the apex, which sticks upward. And then finally our epiglottis, which is leaf-shaped. Now, these cartilages articulate to provide a number of joints within the larynx. There is the epiglottis articulates with the thyroid cartilage right about here or over here to produce the thyroepiglottic joint. The epiglottis doesn't play a significant role, particularly in phonation, but in speech in general, but is a very important structure for airway protection during swallowing. So, and it tends to have an action of sort of pitching or rocking or folding over during swallowing. The second key joint is something called the cricothyroid joint, right about here, where that inferior horn of the thyroid cartilage articulates with a small facet on the lateral surface of the cricoid cartilage. And then finally, we have a pair of arytenoid joints right here and right here, and this is where the arytenoids articulate with the cricoid. And these last pair of joints, the cricoarytenoid and cricothyroid joints, are important because they help. Their articulations affect voice production. If we look at the cricothyroid joint in a little more detail, as I said, it works slightly like a hinge where it rocks, but it also slides in this direction as well. So it slides back and forth and also causes a rocking of the thyroid about the cricoid. And when it does that, it actually increases the distance between the arytenoid cartilage and the anterior surface of the um, thyroid. And it turns out that the vocal fold runs and attaches these to these 2 points, so it actually can have effect on vocal fold length. The cricoarytenoid joint has a much more complicated pattern of articulation. It sits atop this cricoid ring, and it can the arytenoids can slide back and forth in a down here, slide back and forth along the surface of it in what we call a translational kind of movement. So you can see here how the arytenoids are moving, kind of sliding, but they can also rock or pitch, rotate on the cricoid cartilage as well. Here's an example where you can see it kind of doing this. And the combination of the sliding and the pitching and rolling can create a variety of configurations, and that helps move and change the position of the vocal fold. That's the end of this first portion of the anatomy review.